So I don't get any overtime.
Darn it.
Okay, getting some feedback. Can everybody check their microphones and make sure they're muted? Thank you.
Looks like we've got a lot of people joining still right now. We'll give it another minute or so, and then Tyler will get us started.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think there's a few people filing in, but it looks like most of us are here, so we'll go ahead and get going. Just want to say good afternoon and thank you for joining us today. We want to welcome everyone to this training session on testing and repairing PDF accessibility in Adobe Acrobat Pro. My name is Tyler Winters, and I am an accessibility specialist for MSF&W Consulting. Also here with me is Senior Accessibility Specialist Melissa Romanato, and we're going to be taking turns leading the discussion and demonstrations today. In previous sessions, we learned what accessibility is and how it relates to electronic documents and what that experience is like for people with disabilities. And then we learned how to make the most accessible document possible from the start using Microsoft Word and how to properly save that document as a PDF. So today we're going to learn how to test a PDF for accessibility and then how to repair common PDF accessibility issues. Before we get to all that though, a few housekeeping items to note. These sessions are being recorded and they will be made available for you to view for a later date. And if you could, please mute your mics to avoid any unnecessary distractions during the training. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to type those in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat and we'll answer those questions as soon as we can. And also, for what it's worth, office hours have been taking place on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Those are open to you guys, so if you have any questions about the training today or any past trainings or anything that you're working on accessibility-wise, you can bring those questions and examples to those office hours, and we will work through those issues in real time. All right, so before we dive in, let's start with a quick but important note. We're going to be using Adobe Acrobat Pro. That's the professional version. This is the version you need for making accessibility repairs. So anytime I mention Acrobat, just know that I'm always referring to Acrobat Pro. Now, before we get into the tools and processes, it's important to understand how a PDF is structured. You want to think of a PDF as having three key parts, three main parts. One of those parts is the physical view, and this is the visual part that you see on the screen. It's what's displayed and what would be printed if you decided to print that document. The next layer is the content layer, and this layer contains the text and images that make up the document itself. We want to make sure that we actually avoid messing with this layer whenever possible, as it can, affect the physical view, but we'll talk more about that later. And then finally, there's the tags layer, and this is the most critical part for accessibility. Tags define the structure of the PDF by identifying text, images, headings, lists, and so on. They also communicate sequence, they communicate reading order and navigation to assistive technologies. This layer is important because without tags, a PDF cannot be accessible. But it's also important to note that just because you have tags doesn't automatically make a PDF accessible. We have to make sure that those tags are accurate and well structured. I think it's also important to note that you should feel safe while adding or editing any tags in the tags layer, because unlike editing the content layer, making edits in the tags layer won't change how the document visually looks. The practice of editing the tags layer is just to help improve the document structure behind the scenes for assistive technologies. And we're going to be diving more into the tags layer here in a bit. Okay, so before we can begin testing and repairing though, we need to do a bit of setup within Acrobat. There are a couple tools and views we need to have at our fingertips when testing and repairing. And we're going to come back and use them in a bit, but for now, we just want to take a minute to find them and get them ready. So at this time, I'm actually going to switch gears and end the PowerPoint presentation because we're going to enter the demo portion of this training. So everything that I'm going to be talking about from here on out, it's actually mentioned within the slides that you've previously received. So if you have those slides handy, you can continue to use those to follow along if you wish. So as I'm pulling up the PDF sample, I want to mention that we are using Adobe Acrobat Pro's Classic view. It's possible that you may be using a different view or look than Classic. And if you are, that's absolutely fine. But I just wanted to mention that because your interface may look slightly different than ours. But rest assured, all of the tools I'm going to be showing you remain the same. So I'm going to pull over that document now. Okay, so I hope everybody can see that. Okay, so first up, with our document open, let's talk about the tags pane. This is going to be a key tool for making our PDFs accessible. You want to think of it as like the control center for managing the tags in your document. And we'll be using it to view, we'll be using it to reorder, modify, even deleting, and even create new tags to ensure everything is structured correctly. So because the tags pane is so important, we need to find this tool and we need to make it more readily available for you when you need to use it. So to bring up the tags pane, we want to head to the View menu at the top of Acrobat. So we're going up to the View menu up here, and then we want to go to Show Hide, just down here. Oops. And then we want to go to Navigation Panes and select Accessibility Tags. Okay. So that opens up our tags tree. So once the tags pane is open, there's one thing we need to set up, and it's a feature called Highlight Content. And this feature is super helpful because it visually shows us the specific content that each tag is tied to in the document, and it makes it way easier to see what's what and what piece of content you may have selected from the tag tree. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make these a little bigger so you guys can see that. Now, the highlight content feature may be enabled by default for you, but in case it's not, you can actually turn that on by going up to the options button here in the tags tree or tags pane. And then we want to come all the way down to highlight content. So if a check mark is already displayed next to highlight content, then that means that the feature is already enabled, so you don't have to do anything. But if it's not, go ahead and just click highlight content and that will turn it on. So mine is already on, by default. And I can kind of show you what that does. So if I click on the figure, which is an image in the tags pane, we can see that we get this nice little pink or purple outline over the image. Also, you know, I select the H1, it shows me where I'm at in the document. So here's the list, here's the next H2, H3, and so on. Okay. Go ahead and close that for now to give us some more space. So now let's talk about two essential accessibility tools in Acrobat Pro. There's the accessibility check and then the reading order tool. And these are going to be your go-to tools. One is for testing accessibility and the other is for making repairs. And here's how we can go about finding those. So if we go to the accessibility tools menu in Acrobat, which is down here, well, we could get there going there, or come back. There's the tools tab up here, takes you to the same place. And what we want to do is we want to find the accessibility option here, which is right here. We're going to click that. And so that's going to open up the accessibility tools pane. And this is where we're going to find accessibility check and the reading order tools listed. So we got accessibility check here and reading options. Now, since we're going to be using these tools a lot, we can make life a little easier by adding them to our toolbar. So we don't have to go finding them and doing a whole bunch of clicking. So all you have to do is just click and drag the items up into the toolbar. Now, sometimes dragging them in place can be a little difficult. You can see that I just tried to drag it up there and missed. So I like to just drag and drop them right next to the icon or the last icon in the toolbar. That seems to do it. And you could see, I don't know, you could see how there's a little circle with a line through it, meaning that I can't drop it just yet. But once my cursor comes back, we should be good. Yeah, there we go. So sometimes it can be a little tough adding them to the toolbar, but just takes a little finessing, but you'll get it. So after you successfully get these added, they will stay in your toolbar for future Acrobat sessions, and that'll just save you time every time you come back for any PDF remediation inside of Acrobat. Got those up there. I'm going to go ahead and close this now to save some room. Okay, so next, we're going to dive into the next step, which is testing the accessibility of our newly created PDF and learning how to repair some common issues along the way. So to get started, let's take a closer look at that reading order tool and see it in action. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Oops. I actually grabbed the wrong icon. I grabbed the reading options icon. We wanted reading order, which is down here. So it probably helps to read. Okay, so I'm going to click on the reading order option there. Okay. So the reading order tool, it's here, you know, to make our lives easier, and for the most part it does. However, I do want to mention that the name reading order can be a bit misleading. While this tool can help with reading order, it's really more about handling other accessibility fixes instead of actual reading order. It is a great tool for quickly tagging content. It's a great tool for backgrounding or artifacting images, editing tables, and a bunch more things. We'll be using it as much as we can, but there will still be times when we'll need to just dive into the tags pane for more detailed adjustments. So we'll go through how to use this tool in just a bit, but there are a few key things to keep in mind when using this tool. Acrobat refers to images as figures, and so if I'm going to pull this up here. So we remember in the tags pane, the image is actually just called a figure. The background artifact button, I don't know if you could see it because it's kind of grayed out, but it's down here. That's used for marking decorative images or decorative lines or making other content that maybe you don't want to be read by a screen reader. So if you want a screen reader to ignore something in particular in your document, you would want to go ahead and background that or artifact it. There is a table editor built in, and you can actually switch. I'm going to close this for now, this tags pane. And you can actually switch between page content order and structure types for better clarity. So if we come down here, if we have this show page content groups on, so for page content order, which is currently selected, this setting actually tries to show you the current reading order of the document as it pertains to the tags pane, which is over here. So it should be in the order that the tags pane elements are showing us. However, this view may not be that helpful. So we recommend, if you're going to use the page content group setting, to use structure types. And you can see that changes what these tags here on these elements display. And it's actually just the structure types is actually just showing you what that element is. So we know this image, it's a figure, and then this annual report text, it's the H1, and so on. So when it comes to actual reading order, we'll show you how to do that properly later in this training. So the reading order tool is, it's going to save us a lot of time, but like anything else, it does have its limitations. So we'll learn how to work with it and when to go beyond it. So I'm going to close the reading order tool for now. And again, we will be coming back to it. Okay, so our other go-to tool is the accessibility check. And this automated tool basically just scans your document for any potential issues, and it generates a report that serves as a handy guide for making repairs. So to run the accessibility check, all you have to do is click on the accessibility check icon that we just added in the upper toolbar. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And when you run the accessibility check, you'll get a dialog box that just confirms what is going to be audited during this check. And you can choose what needs to be checked and what doesn't, but I'd recommend just leaving these settings the way they are. It's the default settings. However, if you wish to not have this dialog box appear every time you run an accessibility check, because maybe it gets annoying, I personally don't like it, you can actually just uncheck the show this dialog when the checker starts box down here. So if you don't want this dialog box to pop up every time, just uncheck this box and then hit start checking. So once we click the start checking button, this is going to run the checker. And you can see here, this is basically the audit report here. So the results will appear in this pane, and it just provides a detailed list of issues or potential issues found in the document. And like I said, it's a great starting point to help us identify what needs fixing and guide our repair process. So if we take a closer look at this pane, this accessibility checker pane, you'll notice the results are organized into sections. And in each section, there's specific rules listed under each one. And each rule has, it has an icon or status to help you quickly identify what needs attention to make your document accessible. So here, you can see the status here for, let me see if I can make that a little bigger. The status for accessibility permission flag, it's passed. Image only, PDF passed, tag PDF passed, and so on. But here's a quick rundown of what some of those icons can mean. And this PDF is in really good shape. Melissa's going to show you one that's not. in a little bit. So you'll see more of these icons that I'm about to go over. But basically a blank space, which you see here, there's no icon next to these. In older versions of Acrobat, there used to be a green check mark. So if you see a green check mark or a blank space, it just means the rule has passed and that item is accessible, so you don't have to worry about it. Then you might see a blue circle with a question mark. This means that the automated test couldn't determine a pass or fail. So these items are going to need a manual check, like reading order or color contrast. Those things are always going to require a human touch. So Acrobat can't determine that on its own. It needs you to determine that for it. And you might also see, again, no example here just yet, but a red circle with an X means the item did not pass and it has failed the check. So that's going to need addressed. You're going to have to fix that. Additionally, a yellow triangle with an exclamation mark means that a rule was intentionally skipped by the user running the checker. And what that means is, if we went back to that that dialog box that appeared when I initially clicked the accessibility check icon, the summary skipped option was unchecked there. So if I wanted that to be included, I would just make sure that option is checked in that dialog box. So now that we've got our tools set up and we have a better understanding of the accessibility checker results, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Melissa at this time, and she's going to walk us through how to use the checker to start making repairs.
Great, thank you, Tyler. You should be seeing my screen, but it looks exactly like Tyler's screen because I have opened that same document that we created at the end of our Word training. We used save as PDF and we converted it over, and it brought over pretty much everything we did in Word for accessibility. So if I run the check, I'm going to see that I only have two things that are flagged. Both of those are manual checks, as Tyler just explained. And so these are things that the machine can't tell. It needs us to check for it to make sure that these pass. Okay, so before I talk, well, let's talk about those, I guess. So the first one is logical reading order. And this is something that we can check manually using the tags tree. So if you click on to the tags tree, as Tyler showed us before, we kind of get this visual highlight in the form of a magenta box around the item that is currently focused in the tag tree. So I can see my figure, and if I just arrow down through my tag tree, this is a test of the reading order of the document. So the order of the tags in the tag tree is the order that a screen reader user will hear that information. So I can simply arrow down through the document. Some things are chunks, like the table is a whole chunk and the list above it was. And I can see that things are in the correct order. If I did need to fix something, I can do that right here by moving things around in the tags tree. So for example, if I've got my heading 1 before my image and I want the figure or image to be above it, I can simply left click and drag and drop to move things. I can also use my keyboard. So I can use Control X or cut and Control V or paste, V for Velcro, to move things around in the tags tree. So super easy to check that reading order and make any necessary corrections. This is again the way that is the easiest to do it. There is the order panel that shows on the reading order tool, but again, it's not as easy to make corrections, and it doesn't always sync up right with the tags tree. So tags tree is where you're going to want to set the reading order. Again, just arrow through, verify, drag and drop anything that is in the wrong place. So pretty easy check, especially in a short document. Even in a longer one, it doesn't take that long to just arrow down. Right, I'm going to switch back to my checker. The other manual check that we're always going to have for a document is color contrast. The machine can't check that. We did use the accessibility checker in Word. Word's accessibility assistant does check color contrast. We also talked about color contrast when we created this document. We kept it in mind. You know, for example, we made sure that our background color on our table cells still provides sufficient contrast between the text and the background color. So you can, again, make those corrections in Word, but making those corrections in Acrobat is nearly impossible. It really depends on where the document was created. So hopefully by the time it gets to you, the color is already been corrected, or if you created the document, you corrected it at the time of creation, and you don't have to do anything in Acrobat for color contrast, because it's easy to accidentally change the physical view or the way the document looks when you don't mean to, if you start trying to change colors in Acrobat. Okay, so the document that I created with accessibility in mind, those were the only checks that I got, these two manual checks. I do want to suggest a couple other things that you check just kind of out of habit, and that's to kind of provide a secondary check, I should say, and that is alt text. So, you know, we did add alternate text to our meaningful images in Word, but it's always good to take another look at that alt text, make sure that, you know, everything's spelled right, that nothing, you know, maybe you put in a placeholder at one point and you meant to come back and add it, but you forgot. So I'm just going to show you a quick way to check that alternate text in Acrobat. So the Acrobat checker will tell you if it's missing, but it can't tell you if that alternate text is correct, right? The machine doesn't know. So in my accessibility tools, there's a set alternate text option. I'm just going to say okay. And you'll see that it kind of walks through all the figures or images in the document and allows you to see the alternate text that's there. You can actually type right in here and make changes or corrections if needed. You can also mark a figure as decorative if it should have been maybe in the Word and it wasn't. So I can just arrow through. It's kind of a small little box, but I can read and make sure that everything is correct. So that's kind of a manual check that I'm going to add to the list. It's always good to make sure that something doesn't get by you as far as maybe accidentally forgetting to double check that alternate text. I do want to point out too, just as we're going, and Tyler might have mentioned this, some of you might be using a version of Acrobat that looks a little bit different. There's what they call new Acrobat, and then there's what you see on my screen, which I'm going to call classic Acrobat. They're all the features are almost exactly the same. Things are flipped. So if you're using the new version of Acrobat, your tools are going to be on the left side, and your panes, like tags pane, for example, are going to be on the right side. So everything that we're doing and talking to you about today is doable in either version, but you might have to go to a little bit of a different place to find it. So I just wanted to point that out in case any of you are looking at this and saying that doesn't look like mine. Okay, one other thing I want to mention before we move on is another check that you might get in a document. If your document is 21 pages or longer, Acrobat will require that the document have bookmarks. Bookmarks come over automatically from Word if you've used headings. So think of this kind of like the table of contents, right? When you convert it or save it to Adobe PDF, your heading structure will come across into the bookmarks for the Acrobat document, the PDF, and they look great. They're already there. But it's something that I just want you to be aware of where they are and where you can find it. Because if you do have a longer document that is 21 pages or longer, then that bookmarks check will be run. So right now it says passed, and that's because they're there, but it's also because it's fewer than 21 pages in length. If you do need to add bookmarks to a document, you can do that easily in the bookmarks pane. You can say new bookmarks from structure. You can choose the heading levels, like how deep you want it to go. In this case, we've got H2s and H3s under our H1 here. If you have, say, a 500-page report, maybe you only want bookmarks to the H2s or the main subsections of that document and not every single heading, because, then you end up with a list maybe thousands of things long and it's too much. So that's why you can select the levels of headings. We don't recommend that you link to other things. As you know, keyboard users have some ways to navigate, specifically assistive technology users such as screen reader users have even more ways to navigate. So really just focus on the headings there, even though those other options are available. This is just to allow primarily a keyboard user to jump quickly to a section in the document. All right, so when we created our document with accessibility in mind, we didn't have to do very much in PDF. We simply did our manual checks of color contrast and reading order. And I kind of added that manual check of just making sure my alternate text is correct. And then if you have a longer document, you need to take a look at your bookmarks as well. All right, but most of the time, or a lot of time, you might be receiving documents that were not created with accessibility in mind. So we're going to walk through some scenarios and errors you might run into when you encounter PDFs kind of in the wild, and how to fix the common errors that you might encounter. So I'm going to start by opening a new document, and you can see that it visually looks exactly the same as our previous document. We're going to kind of keep this theme throughout. And the first thing I'm going to do when I open a document that someone's asked me to post or share is run that accessibility checker. And right away, zoom in, looks a little scary, right? So I've got, I don't know, 15 or 20 issues here that show up right away. And when I open this first section of the checker panel, the document section, I can see that I have an error message related to tagged PDF. And in this case, I have failed tagged PDF. And sure enough, if I look at the tags tree, it simply says no tags available. That tags layer doesn't exist. So this PDF maybe was printed to PDF, or however it was created or converted to PDF, those tags did not come along for the ride. So if you have an untagged PDF, the first thing you're going to want to do is add tags to that document. And there are a few different ways to get to this and do this. You can go under your accessibility tools and choose auto tag document. In the tags tree itself, I can right click and choose auto tag document. So a few ways to do the same thing. So I'm going to just click auto tag document. It's going to run through its process here. And you'll see that it has automatically generated tags. So it's done its best. I've got some kind of what I'm going to call container tags, like section, just for different parts of content. Those aren't meaningful. They just kind of structure the tags here to make them a little easier to look at. But right away, after I've done that, I'm going to save, because whenever we make a change in Acrobat, you need to save. There is no auto save in Acrobat, and you will learn the hard way that you must save, or else you're at the risk of losing whatever changes you make. And that can be because Acrobat crashes, whatever, you maybe accidentally override something. So I like to say every time you do something you like, hit save to celebrate. And that way you don't lose anything you've done. So I'm going to run my checker again. And I went from having, I don't know, it was like 17 or so items in that checker. Now, just by tagging the document, I'm down to my manual checks and some alternate text errors. So once you fix one error, you might be fixing other errors as well. So some of these errors kind of snowball with one another. So that's why we, recommend when you see a very scary accessibility checker results with lots of findings, then you just work through them one at a time. And a lot of times fixing one will fix some other ones as well. All right, so I would work through this and address the rest of the errors, but I want to open a different document that's going to have some specific errors that you're likely to encounter in the wild. So this document, again, looks exactly the same as our previous document. You might remember from our JAWS demonstration, we had our bad document and we had a good example and a bad example. And this document is actually our bad example from our JAWS demo. So we are going to show you how to fix common errors that you might encounter on documents that you're given. So again, I'm going to start with my checker here and keep zooming. Sorry about that. So let's walk through the error messages. I'm going to come back to my manual checks, my logical reading order and color contrast. Logical reading order, it's something that like you'll probably test, I would say usually at least twice in the document. You'll kind of do it at the very end just to make sure nothing got out of order, but then you might need to address it in other ways as well. So we'll come back to that one, but let's talk about the next one, title here that failed. So in this case, what it is saying is the document doesn't have a title. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a file name. If you look in the application title bar up here, you can see the file name sample2.pdf. You can also see it on the tab for the open document there. But the title is the human readable name. It's what a screen reader user hears when they first open the document. And it's also what a screen reader user can hear on demand at any time. Where am I? What document am I in? They can use a keyboard command and they can hear the title of that document to confirm. And that title typically will match the document's level 1 heading. So to fix this, to add a title, I can simply right-click on the error message, choose Fix. I get a description dialog. The first field is for the title. I'm going to uncheck Leave As Is since nothing's in there and that's not what I want. And I am simply going to type the text that matches my heading level 1 for the document, in this case, annual report. There is no spell check here, so you'll want to make sure that you double check your spelling as you type in there. You'll also want to use normal title case, right, where each word is capitalized except for maybe some articles and prepositions. So you'll just want to double check that as you go. I'm going to say OK, and you'll notice right away that error message has changed to pass. And you might say, well, that's great, but you told me it was going to change it in the application title bar and in the tab for the document, and it hasn't. And that is because I have not hit save yet. Again, I've got to celebrate with my save. I'm going to do that, and then you'll see now it's displaying that text that I typed as the title in both the application title bar and also on the tab. Okay, so a pretty easy one. In most cases, from Office documents, if there is a title in the Office document, it will carry over, but some other software, it doesn't. So you'll probably run into this one, I would say, fairly often out in the wild. I do want to kind of talk about the other ones just real briefly that we don't have examples of. So this accessibility permission flag, I don't think I've ever seen that one fail, maybe only if the document is secured. Sometimes there are some security settings that basically prevent it from the document from sharing the accessibility information. But if a document is secured, then you can't edit it. You can't run through this process anyway. You need an unsecured version to make it accessible. So you're not likely to run into that one at all. We're going to talk about image-only PDFs. We're going to talk about those specifically in our scanned PDF class that we're going to have later on. We'll have a training on what to do with scanned documents, and that's where we get into image-only PDFs. We already talked about auto tagging documents that are not tagged. We're going to come back to reading order here. I do want to talk about the primary language rule. So this is checking whether the primary text language for the PDF is specified. And since this document came from Word, the language of English comes along with it from Word. But I do want to point this out that you can change the primary language of a document if it is in a language other than English, for example. So I'm going to show you where to do that up here in the File menu. I'll go to Properties, and on the Advanced tab, the very last tab, I've got a language drop down here, and you can see ours is set to English, which is great. That's what we want it to be. However, if you have an entire document that is in a different language, for example, Spanish, this is where you can come and set the document language to Spanish, and that will assume that every piece of content is in Spanish. I'm going to change it back to English because that one doesn't apply there. I'm going to say okay. I do want to point out you can also change the language on a specific tag. So for example, maybe I have a sentence in this document that has some Spanish instructions, maybe, where to contact, where to go to get a full Spanish version, something like that. If I want to change the language for a specific tag, I can right click on that tag, go to Properties, and each individual tag also has a language setting. So it's going to pull from the primary language of the document, which is English, US English. And but if this were in a different language, I can make that change right here for that paragraph only. It would not change the language for the entire document. So you can get pretty fine-tuned there. And so, sometimes you'll see a brochure or a flyer that's all in a different language, or maybe you'll have a brochure that has primarily English, but maybe a few paragraphs in a few different languages with some abbreviated information. You can change those language settings there. All right, go back to our checker. We already talked about title and bookmarks. So let's go ahead and address the logical reading order while we're here, so we can just kind of move down section by section. And the order, while sometimes doing one thing will affect the errors in another thing, you can kind of work on it in the order you like. So let's go to logical reading order. And again, I'm going to open my tags tree, zoom in a hair, and I can, again, just arrow down, and it's going to walk through the order of the content in the document. And it's been a while since we did our JAWS demo, but some of you might remember some of the order problems we had. So first of all, we've got a bunch of images kind of grouped together at the top. And then as we read down, when we get to our columns, our district and county columns here, you'll notice as I arrow down, and you might remember this from the demo, these things are grouped across. So instead of reading down, the first column with a heading and a paragraph, a heading and a paragraph, and then over to the right column, it's actually reading across. So this is a different kind of reading order problem. This is a reading order problem where I can't necessarily just move things to the right place. I actually need to regroup them before I can move them into the right order. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Looks like our table and the rest of it's fine. So let's start with the figures. Those are simple. Let's get them in the right place. I've got a figure here that comes after my districts and counties. So I'm going to grab that and I can just drag it and drop it into the right place after the final text there. I also have my goal progress chart here that goes at the very end. I'm going to cut it and paste it, move it underneath that heading 3. Again, I'm just doing this without even thinking about it. I'm hitting Control S to save, or you can hit save up on there on your toolbar. When you do something you like, save. All right, so I've got my figures in the right place. Let's talk about this content that needs to be regrouped. I'm going to change my width here a little bit so that hopefully you can see a little better. Okay, so to regroup the content, I'm going to use my reading order tool. So I'm going to open that from up on my toolbar. And I am going to draw a box around my first heading here. And it's a little unintuitive, you know, it's like you might be tempted to draw your box really tight, but you have to make it kind of big and ignore the vertical lines. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything that there are 2 characters in some of them and 1 character in the other. Whenever we're using the reading order tool, it's kind of like drawing, trying to map a border around something that exists in the physical view. It's not always perfect or precise. It sometimes looks kind of weird. So just don't get freaked out by that. The important thing is that your outer box is around all that content. And I'm just going to say, okay, that's a heading 4. And you can kind of see now it's broken into 2 pieces, right? And I can also see in my tags tree, now I have, running out of space already here, now I have 2 different pieces of content. So I'm going to do that with the rest. I'm going to grab all these District 1 counties, draw a box around those. I'm going to mark it as text/paragraph. My screen jumps when I do that, sorry, because I'm zoomed in. And I'll do that over here. I'm going to do the same thing for my heading 4s and my other 2 paragraphs here. And I'm going to close my reading order tool. And now back in my tags tree, they're still in the wrong order, but everything is broken into pieces. And now I can drag and drop those pieces into the correct place in the reading order. So I've got my heading. I'm going to go down my first column. I can actually select multiple things at a time to move. So in this case, I used my keyboard. I held down the Control key and I selected the paragraph as well. So I can just drag and drop those into the right place. And it looks like I've got it good. So I'm going to go ahead and save. There's no right or wrong way to move things. You can move them individually. You can drag and drop. You can cut and paste, whatever you feel more comfortable with. And that might change a little bit over time as you use it more. You might be, carefully, slowly dragging and dropping. And then after you've used it for a while, I tend to just use cut and paste because it doesn't require the precise fine mouse skills to get it to drop in the right place. Sometimes it's easy to accidentally drop something in the wrong place. So this paragraph I need to move up. Like you have to make sure it's a sibling and not a child. If I drop it here, it's going to actually go inside that heading 4, which is not what I want. So that's why I like cut and paste, because it's a little more specific and I don't have that risk. However, if you do something you don't like in the tags tree, only in the tags tree, you can use Control Z to undo. And then you can just try again. So Control Z will work, but only if you do it right away, because again, once you get it how you want it, you're going to save. So that's a big thing. It hasn't always been that way in the tags tree, and when they added that, that was huge. So it's a big deal to be able to do that. So kind of play around, dragging and dropping, cut, paste, get used to it. Anything you do can be undone. So you know, try to relax while you're doing it and not be too wary of making a mistake. All right. I'm going to go back to my checker. One thing I didn't mention when we looked at the first document, these manual checks, they're going to stay there. If I want, I can right click and choose pass. That's just to remind myself, yeah, I did that and then we're all good. Same thing for color contrast. I can pass that. But once I am done with this document, so maybe I'm fixing the document and I'm sending it over to Tyler for him to double check before it gets posted. Once I close the document, I send it to Tyler. He opens it and runs the checker. Those manual checks are going to come back. Even if I close my own document and reopen it, even though I have saved my changes and I run my checker, those manual checks are always going to come back. They're always going to come back and remind you. So just because you marked it as passed, it's just kind of for this use, this one-time use. All right, what have we got? So let's move on to the page content section, and let's talk about the tagged content failed rule. This is one that, if you get it, is particularly annoying. One thing I can do is I can open that rule and it will show me if there's multiple. I'll have a list of elements, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can click on it and it may be able to show me what content is not tagged. So in this case, I can tell pretty easily that this heading text at the top of page 2, metrics and measures used to monitor ICN operations, is not tagged. It's missing from the tag tree. And when I can see what content is missing, I can use my reading order tool. I can draw a box around it. Oops, got a little too big with my box there. And then I know this is supposed to be a heading 2, so I can simply click H2 and that will mark it as a heading level 2. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. However, occasionally you will click on the element and you will not be able to visually see it in your document. Doesn't happen all, well, it happens. Ideally, you can see it and you can just tag it and go, but it does happen, and that's why we're covering it today, that you cannot find it. You don't know where it is. So I'm going to show you how to get that content into the tags tree, even if you don't know where it is, in case you encounter this issue. So one thing I am going to notice is when I click on it, even if I can't see it, it will still take me to that page in the document. So I do want to note that the error or the element is on page 2. It's going to be important. I'm going to switch to my tags tree. I'm going to put my cursor somewhere on page 2 of the document. I'm just going to put it right here. Actually, I'm going to put it on this H3, just so it's not buried deep in that table. And then on the options menu in my accessibility tags, whoops, I'm not sure what I just did there. I just cut it accidentally. All right, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to go to find. I'm going to choose unmarked content. So unmarked is a word that Acrobat uses that means the same thing as untagged. You're going to find a theme that Acrobat kind of uses different words for different things. We've already talked about how it says figure instead of image, right? Or it says artifact or background instead of mark as decorative, right? So this is one where the error said untagged content, and here I'm searching for unmarked content. Same thing. I'm going to search the current page, and I'm going to click the Find button. And whether you can visually see what's in it or not, it's going to find it, and you can simply hit Tag Element. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. This is actually getting the backgrounds. And then there was like an empty space. I'm going to go all the way through until it says there are no more, and then I'm going to hit Close. And now you can see that inside this heading level 3, I've got the goal progress text, which was there before I started. I've got my newly tagged content, metrics and measures used to monitor, whatever. And then I have these paths in this blank. And those are just things it sees, but none of those things are meaningful. The paths are actually the background colors on the table cells. And this little space is literally just a space after this image. So I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to add a new tag to put my newly tagged text into. So I'm going to right click, choose new tag. I said before that that should be a heading 2. So I'm going to drop it down. I can choose heading level 2. I'm going to say OK. And I now have this new heading container. I'm going to drag my metrics text into it, so it's fully contained inside of it. And then I'm just going to move that heading to the right place, which is right before the table. So now I've got my figure, my heading 2, and then I've got the table. Down below, I still have these extra things. They're not really a problem. The screen reader might say the word blank if it encounters them. I don't like them. I'm going to get rid of them. I can do that by artifacting them or marking them as decorative. I can do that individually. I can right click on one, choose change tag to artifact, leave everything the same here. Don't change anything, just say OK, and you'll see it disappears. So I'm just going to select them all at once, change tag to artifact, say OK. Now the only thing left is that H3, the goal progress, which was there originally. So I'm going to save. And now if I rerun my checker, that tagged content failed has now passed. So again, tagged content is making sure, this rule is making sure that all the content in the document is included in the tags tree or marked as an artifact. It has to be one or the other. One note is when you have a document that has headers or footers, and if you've been to office hours, we've talked about this a little bit. Content in headers or footers, when you save as PDF from Word, do not come into the tags tree automatically in the PDF document. However, you can use what I just showed you. You can use the reading order tool. If you had content in the header that was important, you could draw a box around it. You can mark what type of content it is and then put it into the correct place in the tag tree. So you can add that content to the tags tree, but it doesn't automatically come over as tagged. Any questions at this point? I don't want to get too far away. If anybody has any questions about anything we've done in this document section or so far with page content. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other items here. Again, they're not going to be common errors that you'll see. You might get tagged annotations. Tagged annotations to Acrobat means form fields or links. And every now and then you might have a link depending on the original software and the way it was created that might not come over as a link into your Acrobat document, your PDF document. It's pretty rare. you can see, you know, the one that we created earlier, it came across, it's fine, it's there. We don't have any errors with it. We just created it normally in Word. We didn't do anything special. We will talk about this error a little bit more when we talk about forms. So that's going to be a separate session. We don't have any form fields in this PDF document today. Tab order, again, if you have focusable, keyboard focusable content such as links or form fields, you might get a tab order error. And if you do, you can simply right click and there'll be a fix option and you just click it. It's very, very easy. Character encoding errors you might get. And that again depends on the fonts of the original document. Sometimes Acrobat doesn't have fonts or replacement fonts for some content. So you might get a character encoding error. That's best addressed by changing the font in the source document. So if you run that checker and at the very beginning you see a character encoding error, if possible, you'll want to go back to the original document and make sure you're using, you know, you're using a common enough font, something that Acrobat sees and understands. Doesn't happen a ton, every now and then, but not a ton. Tag multimedia, you'll probably never see this fail. Same thing with screen flicker and scripts. These are in timed response. These are all for like interactive PDFs. And probably beyond forms, you're not going to have a lot of interactivity in your PDF documents. You might see navigation links, and this is simply a manual check to say, hey, you know, make sure your links work. Okay. We've got nothing in the forms section. And again, that's because we don't have any form fields in this document. We will be doing that session actually coming up in just a couple weeks. So forms we'll be covering on April 8th, and then we'll be doing that session again on April 24th. So if you're someone who works with forms, please make sure you sign up for one of those sessions, and we'll be covering forms and how to create them, how to tag them, and these error messages in that session. All right, let's talk about alternate text. We have one image here that does not have alternate text. It's a little hard to see there, but it's the Capitol building here at the bottom of page 1. It's got kind of a blue highlight there when I click on it. There are a couple different ways to fix this. As I showed you before in your accessibility tools, you can use the set alternate text option. And this is actually a good reminder to check that. This is why I say to check it manually every time. So we only have one error, and it's for our second image down here. But right away when I open this, I see, ooh, that's some bad alt text right there, right? It says the word logo, which doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't convey the meaning of the image. The image has the word Iowa in it. So I'm going to replace that logo kind of generic alt text there with meaningful alt text, which is the word Iowa, to exactly match the text I see in the image. And then if I go through, I jump to the next image. I can choose decorative figure if I want there. I'm not going to do that yet. I am going to move to the next one. Again, you'll see I have bad alternate text there. It's just a placeholder. It's actually the file name of the spreadsheet where this chart came from. So I do need to correct my alternate text here as well. And, you know, I can do that just like I did in my Word example. Year, sorry, the word out there, prior year. And I'm sorry, I can't make this box any larger. And current year. I'm just going to put the first values in, and you know how the rest goes. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close that. It didn't have any effect because I still left that decorative image there with no alt text. So there are a couple different ways I can mark it as decorative in that set alternate text. Depending on your version of Acrobat, that may or may not give you the results you want. So I'm going to show you what is kind of the tried and true and most reliable way to mark a figure as decorative in Acrobat. So I'm going to close out of my tools there. If I right click on this message and I say show in tags panel, it's going to jump me to that figure in the tags panel. I can open it up. I see my image in there. I can right click and choose change tag to artifact. That window is going to pop up. I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to say okay. You'll see that now the figure tag is empty. It doesn't have anything inside of it. I can delete that empty figure tag, delete empty tag, hit delete on my keyboard, multiple ways to do it. And you'll see it just simply goes away. It just skips over that entirely, which is what we had our screen reader do, right? When we did our demo, we had that marked as decorative or artifacted, and that allows the screen reader to know that it can be ignored safely. I'm going to save. If I rerun my checker, you'll see now that that error has passed. So again, there are multiple ways to do it. Sometimes using some ways will leave that empty figure tag and you have to go delete it anyway. So that's why I like to just artifact it myself and delete it while I'm in there, and then I don't have to worry about that happening. Again, different versions of Acrobat have dealt with that a little bit differently over the years. So I'm going to use the one that I know works regardless of what version you're using. All right, a few other error messages that you are not as likely to run into here in alternate text. Nested alternate text, this is like if you have a tag inside of a tag and the nested tag has alternate text. Just to show you here, it's kind of weird. I'm just going to click on a paragraph and go to properties. In the object properties, regardless of the tag type, it has this alternate text for images field. And this is where you can put alternate text for actual figures, and that's good, but it doesn't apply to these other tags. I'm not sure why it's there. I feel like it should at least be grayed out because this isn't a figure or an image. But it does have it on other tags as well. So if you have alternate text on a non-figure tag, you might get the other elements alternate text failed. I don't think I've ever seen associated with content or hides annotations. I've never seen either of those fail. So so those are the three that, but most of the time it's going to be that figure's alternate text, especially if it's a document that someone created without accessibility in mind and just sent over to you. And, you know, depending on the document and your familiarity with the content, you might have to go back to the author and say, hey, I have no idea what this image means. Maybe it's something technical, you know, something only someone in that department or area would be able to provide alternate text for. So you might have to go back to the source to get appropriate alternate text if it's missing. All right, let's move on to tables. Okay, so in the tables section, I've got a few different errors. Rows, TH, and TDs, we'll kind of come back and talk about those. Let's focus on the errors that I'm seeing here. So the first one says headers failed. And if I open it, I can see there's only one table in this document. So it's not a surprise that it's gonna list them all, but in this case, there's just one. So I know which table we're talking about. And this rule is checking to make sure that every table has column and row headers. And when we created our table in Word, it automatically comes across with column and row headers. It assumes that the first row of the table contains the column headers and that the first column of the table contains the row headers. In this case, maybe this came from somewhere else. Whatever, it does not have those indications. So let's fix that. We're going to use the reading order tool. We're going to use something called the table editor. So if I click somewhere in the table, I can then use the table editor button. And a couple things happen. The first thing is that the reading order tool goes away. So it kind of gave me more room on the screen. So that's nice. But I can also tell I'm in table editor mode. And I can tell because it's taken the table and it's given it kind of this pinky red background outline around the cells, whatever. And that kind of lets me know that I'm in the table editor and I can interact with the table. If I click somewhere else, you can see that I'm out of table editor mode and the reading order tool shows back up. If I click it again, it disappears and the pink color comes back. So that's what the color is indicating. So for each column header cell, I'm going to mark it as a column header. So I'm going to right click. Well, let me click first. It might be pretty hard to see. So each cell has kind of a red outline, but when I click in one to select it, it gets kind of a blue outline. I know it might be difficult to see on your screen there. When it has the blue outline, it's selected. If I right click and go to table cell properties, I can set this cell as a header cell versus a data cell. And I can also indicate the scope. So this is basically what type of header cell is it? In this case, it's a column header, right? So this word goals is the header for everything in the column that it's in. So I'm going to say okay to that. I'm going to leave my row span and column span the same. I'm not going to change anything else. I'm just going to say okay. And you'll notice that it kind of now has a less pink and more red background to it. And then it also changed the color, background color on the cells below it. I'm going to do the same for my other column headers. I'm actually going to select all three of them at once to save myself a little time. I can do that by holding down the Shift key on my keyboard and left clicking on each one. Or I can draw a little box inside of all of them, and that will also select them. So now I'm changing properties for all three of them. Table cell properties, header cell, scope, column, okay. And now you can see I've got all four of my header cells marked. And the next thing I can do are my row header cells. So I've got type, and in this case, my scope is row. So it's a header for everything that comes in that row. Leave everything else the same. I'm going to do the same for my remaining ones and header row. And then I end up with kind of a nice looking little background pattern here. So in this case, now all my header cells have this kind of pink or red background, and all my data cells have the gray. And again, that's just in this table editor mode. So I'm going to save. I'm going to click somewhere else, close my, it didn't change anything in the physical view. But when I'm in editor mode, I can kind of see that the changes I made have taken. I can right click, check again, and now you can see that the table headers error has passed. So now I have column and row headers. Again, if I did this right, created the table in Word, pasted it into Word, those come along for the ride. So less work for you in the long run. Let's talk about our next error here, and this is the regularity error. And this is checking to make sure that each column and row has the same number of cells. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click and choose Show in Tags panel. This is not something I can fix with the table editor. So let's look at what a table looks like in our tags tree here. So I've got my container, which is the table. And then inside of the table, I have TRs or table rows. And inside each table row, I have cells, and they're either THs for table headers or TDs for table data cells. So you can see here, I've got my first row, which contains my column headers. I just marked those as table header cells. And my row header in the next row, followed by the data cells. So this is a very like normal table structure. What I'm doing though is I'm just opening each of those, and I've got 4 cells in each row. I'm going to keep looking here. And as it turns out, my last row of my table actually has an extra cell. Now that cell doesn't have anything in it. I can't open it and see any content. I can't see any content, but hello, I think I got muted. For anyone who is on or just joined, please make sure to mute your microphone so that we don't hear background noise coming from you. Thanks. Okay, so I want to get rid of that extra cell in my table. And still hearing a little bit of background noise there. So I'm going to ask just again, if folks can mute your microphones, that will make sure that our recording doesn't have anything on it that will make the quality not as good. Okay. I'm going to delete this extra table cell. Sometimes people have added, cells for kind of like spacing or something like that because they want it to look a certain way. I don't think that's the case here, but somehow it just has that extra cell. So all I need to do is delete that. I'm going to right click, choose delete tag, or I can just hit delete on my keyboard. And now each row contains 4 cells. So when I save that and I run my checker again, that table regularity rule has now passed. There is a case where you might have a complex table, that is a table that have cells that span across multiple rows or columns, and that's what we're calling a complex table versus what we see here on our screen, which is a simple table. There are special things that you need to do in Acrobat for complex tables to make them accessible, and regularity is related to that, but we are going to talk about that specifically in kind of one of our deep dive sessions, which is on complex tables, and that's coming up in May. So if you are a person who deals with a lot of tables, thinking of things like budget tables or anything that has cells that span rows or columns, then you're going to want to attend that complex tables session to learn a little bit more about what you need to do to make them accessible. Today, we're just focusing on the simple table. All right, I have another rule here. This one it says summary, and you'll notice it's skipped. If I unskip it, it's going to fail. So Tyler explained to us what skipped means. That means I chose to skip it. Don't necessarily recommend you do that, but I just want to use it as an example of what it looks like when you skip. You can add a summary to your table. Again, I'm going to use the reading order tool. I can right click and go to edit table summary. And that brings up this table summary box. And so that rule is simply checking for the presence of a table summary. The weird thing is not all assistive technology is going to read the summary. So it might be safe to skip it, especially if you know your audience and what assistive technology they're using. But if you want to pass the checker and pass every rule in it, then you will need to add a table summary. The table summary is not a description of the table. It's really just kind of a name for the table. So if you'll remember when I did my JAWS demo, when JAWS encounters, the screen reader encounters a table, it will say table with 4 columns and 5 rows. And you can use those special table reading commands to navigate across a row or down a column or say, where am I? And it will give you all that extra information. So a screen reader user already by default gets a lot of information about a table. A table summary just kind of adds another thing, and that's a name for the table. Usually your table likely is preceded by a heading like ours is, where it says metrics and measures used to monitor ICN operations. That text comes right before our table. That is the header, the heading, the section heading for that section that contains the table. My summary is going to match that exactly. So I'm just going to write metrics and measures used to monitor ICN operations. It's kind of redundant. So a screen reader user is going to hear it as the heading, and then they're going to hear it again when they encounter the table. So it's kind of redundant. But again, to pass the checker, it's going to be required that it's added. And if I check again, it's now passed. You're never going to see that. Like you can't hover over a table, for example, and see it. Like you usually can with alternate text, will typically show when you hover, but the table summary does not. For those of you who may know something about HTML, and if you don't, you can ignore this, but it might help some of you understand. You might remember there used to be a summary attribute in HTML that you could apply to tables. That attribute has been deprecated. It's no longer used. And there are other ways to name tables if you desire, using caption or using ARIA label or ARIA labeled by. So I suspect that it's possible over time the table summary might disappear in Acrobat. It might kind of go the same way that it went for HTML, but Adobe is kind of slow to catch up, and I think they think, oh well, it's there and it's fine, and why bother to change it? So it might go away eventually. Some folks using specific screen readers will not hear it. For example, JAWS does not read the summary that I just typed. A JAWS user will not hear it. Last time I checked, which has probably been a few months ago at least, folks using NVDA, a different screen reader, will hear it. So it just kind of depends on the assistive technology being used. JAWS is the most popular screen reader though, and it does ignore it. The other errors here for tables you're unlikely to get. Rows means that you have a table container, I think, but it doesn't have any TRs in it. It just has TDs. Not sure how you make that happen. TH and TD. I think the only way you'll get that is if you have a TH, a table header cell, or a table data cell that is not inside of a table row. Then you'll get that message. But again, that's pretty hard to mess up unless you're moving things around in the tags tree. All right. Let's move on to lists. So we've got 2 rules in this list sections. We have an error for list items failed. This rule is checking that each list item is a child of a list. That seems to make sense, right? And it's also checking that each nested list must be fully contained in a list item. That one's a little bit harder to understand, so we'll get a visual on that so you can see what that means. I do want to point out that the reading order tool is not useful for lists. There is no list item option. There's no list option. There's nothing to do with lists in the reading order tool. So if you do have any list related errors, you'll need to fix them manually in the tags tree. So let's right click on my first error here and show in tags panel. That will just jump me there, which is really helpful when you have a long document. Okay, so let's talk about the structure of a list. So I have an L, and that L is my list container. Inside that list, I am allowed to have LIs, or list items. Each list item can contain anything. It might have an L body, it might have a paragraph, it might have a table, it might have an image. Anything can go inside of there, inside of the LI, but an LI can only go inside of a list. And what gets a little confusing is, in this case, if you look visually, I have my first list item, which everything looks good. It's inside a L, it's inside the LI. And then I have kind of these two list items just hanging out here by themselves. And these are the ones that are a problem because LIs can only be nested inside of Ls or lists. So I don't have a container for this sublist. I've got the two list items, but I don't have the list that they're in. So I need to actually create that container. I'm going to create a new tag. I'm going to choose list as the type, say OK. And now I can just grab those two list items and drop them inside my list. So now each list item is fully contained inside a list. And if I save that and rerun my checker, it fixed it. It's pretty hard to mess up lists. You're not terribly likely to see errors like that with lists. However, I did want to spend some time talking about list structure because what's more common is that you might have errors in your list that do not throw a flag for your checker. So the list checker is not very smart. So right now it says everything looks great. But you'll notice in my second list item, I do have a nested list, but it's actually nested 2 levels deep. So a screen reader user here would hear list of 3 items nesting level 2, because it actually counts the number of L's. So instead of saying nesting level 1, it's going to say it's nested in deeper. Which is really just not correct, right? And might be kind of confusing. So in this case, I can just grab those sublist items, or actually I can just grab the whole sublist here, move it up, and then get rid of that extra layer of list. Again, I don't want you to get too hung up on this. If it was a little too much, if it went over your head, don't worry about it. We're kind of in the weeds here. And I think the important things to remember are that it's hard to mess up a list in whatever source document you're creating your PDF from. And second of all, the list checker isn't great. So just if you have the interest, or if you happen to notice that, for example, something's nested too far in, maybe someone just hit tab multiple times just because they wanted it to look a certain way, then they might get that extra layer of list container in there. If you happen to see it, fix it. If you don't, it's not the end of the world, and your checker might not be smart enough to catch it anyway. All right, let's go back to that checker. This LBL and L body, this one's kind of confusing. I don't think you're ever going to see this error. And a list item can contain what's called the LBL, which is like the label. It's actually like the bullet or the number that precedes the item, and then the L body is what comes after that. It can have those sub tags, but it doesn't need to. I'm not sure that that even works or does anything. All right, let's talk about our final error here. We have a appropriate nesting under our headings. And here, this rule is checking that the order of headings is proper, that we don't skip any heading levels. And we've talked about this before when we talked about headings in our Word document, and our Word accessibility checker also tries to check for appropriate heading nesting. And so if I click here, it's going to show me where my problem is. In this case, it's on this District 1 counties heading. So I can do a couple things. I'm going to open my reading order tool. I can see that I jumped from a heading 2 to a heading 4. And that's not correct. I've skipped heading level 3. So what I really need to do is to change that heading to a heading level 3 to reflect the real organization of that content, the structure. So I can just click on it and then click heading 3, and you'll see right there that it's changed. And I can do that for all of the headings in that section. And if you look in the tags tree, you'll see that it's just changed from an H4 to an H3. I can also change it directly in the tags tree. If you prefer to do that, you can go to properties. I can change my heading level here to a heading 3. I can even just double click and type and edit it. So I've got lots of different ways to make those changes, and you can do what you're comfortable with. Probably a lot of times, especially when you're starting out, the reading order tool feels a little safer. But if you feel like, oh, it's just quicker for me to do it right here in the tags tree, then go ahead and do that. You do have to make sure you follow some rules. So for example, the capitalization of the H here is important. You'll notice that most tags are capitalized, but some of them are only capitalized for the first letter, like figure and table. So if you're familiar with HTML, you might feel a little more comfortable in the tags tree because it's similar, but it is not the same. HTML is kind of the opposite. It requires small h's, for example, instead of capital H's and P's. So it's a little bit different, but similar. But change it where you feel comfortable. Some of you might have noticed when I was arrowing down to check my reading order that those were wrong. So when I broke my content into pieces to reorder, I could have drawn that box and gone ahead and said H3 then, because maybe I noticed it at that time, and then I might have prevented that error from popping up on the checker when I reran it. So this is kind of what I was saying about you might be doing one thing and end up fixing multiple things at once. So that's something you might have noticed when you first were arrowing through the document. The checker for the heading here, it will not create a heading error if the document is missing headings entirely. So someone might give you this document that they created for posting. You might run the checker and not have any errors, but probably when you're checking the reading order, you'll notice, oh, that looks like a heading. It's big, it's bold, it's centered, but it's not marked up as a heading. So in that case, you might have to add headings to the document. And again, that just is a matter of clicking on the text or the tag and changing it to the right heading level. So if you have a document that doesn't have any headings, you will not get the headings nesting error, but you still might have to add headings to the document to make it more usable. And then also if it's a longer document, the nice thing is you can then use those headings to create your bookmarks. So I'm just going to say for the H2s, I type in annual report, and there I've got, for my main sections of my document, I've got those bookmarks. So you'll want to make sure your headings are in place and fixed before you add the bookmarks so that they use the correct heading information. All right. Any questions on anything that we have covered? Okay, I'm going to switch back here to go to slideshow. Just got a little summary here of what we've covered today. Number one, before you do anything, Adobe Acrobat Pro is required for accessibility testing and repair. So you'll want to make sure that you do have the professional version of Adobe Acrobat. If you don't, talk to your supervisor, your IT people, whatever the correct channels are in your organization to request and make sure that you have the professional version so that you can access these features and make these corrections as needed. You're going to want to repeat the process of running the accessibility checker and making repairs. So fix something, save it, rerun your checker, and move on one by one. When you can, use the reading order tool first for repairs. It's kind of a nice and easy way to fix some of those simple things, especially things like changing, heading levels. But use the tags pane when necessary. Don't be afraid to get in there. There are some things you can do only in the tags pane. And then as you do it more, you also might find that in some cases it's quicker for you to work in the tags pane. For example, I've remediated hundreds of thousands of pages of PDF, and I pretty much work exclusively in the tags pane just because it's quickest for me. And probably most importantly is save often, especially if you have a long document. I can't emphasize this enough. Sometimes Acrobat will get unresponsive in a session of use with a large document. So it might crash. You might get the not responding error if you have a long document. And you want to make sure that if you end up having to close out, that you've saved the last good thing you did so that you don't lose anything if you have to close out and come back in. And I think we kind of all learn the hard way. That happens to all of us at one time or the other, but saving is going to help you make it hurt a little bit less as you go on in the process of remediation. All right, that is it for our testing and repairing with Adobe Acrobat Pro. If you are working on documents and you have any of these errors and you're trying to fix them, but you're running into trouble, please bring those documents to office hours. You can bring them, share your screen. We can walk through them together. Also, I'm going to put in the chat, I have an accessibility at MSF&W email account. And you could also, if you're working on a document tomorrow or the next day and office hours aren't till the next week, go ahead and send that document with your question, and I'll remember to bring it to office hours and remember to talk about it there. Those office hours sessions are recorded, so even if for some reason you can't attend, we can still walk through it and you could watch the recording later. Also remember that in addition to our weekly office hours, we've got our next sessions in April are forms. So creating accessible PDF forms. And then in May, we'll be focusing on complex tables, those tables that have spanned cells or cells that span across rows or columns. And then in the fall, we'll have a few more kind of special topics sessions like that. So please feel free to reach out to us with questions, whether it's via email or by coming to office hours. We've got a session tomorrow at 9 a.m. and hopefully we'll see some of you there. Have a good rest of your day.